Now, it is the Monaghan Way, brought to you in association with Northern Sound and myself, Sean McCaffrey. Episode 23, would you believe? And we're really moving in now to the championship end of the season, particularly from the club perspective. We're down to semi-finals, both at intermediate and senior level here in Monaghan. We've already, our junior finalists have been confirmed. And we also have some relegation games this weekend to look forward to. I'm delighted I'm joined by Kieran Kearns just to look ahead to what is occurring and happening on that front. Kieran joined us on co-commentary at the weekend at the quarterfinals, of course, and a couple of surprises, I suppose, on those. And maybe that's where we'll jump in first, Kieran. As always, thanks a million for your company. And when I say surprises, probably the results very much went the way we expected. Listen, if either or the other teams that lost had one got through, you wouldn't have thought it was a big surprise. What surprised me most was the comfort with which they won, i.e. Maracloon comfortable over Carduff, Scotstown comfortable over Latin.
Yeah, well, if I started the Maracloon, Gia and Sean, I certainly didn't see that coming. Not in a million years. I don't think too many did. Just listening to probably Fergal, I suppose, and the likes of Tommy Freeman, two staunch Maracloon men, they did say they had it within their locker and they expected a big performance, and who knew on the day, I suppose, they probably could provide it, and by God did they provide it. They were just explosive in every manner of the word. They were absolutely fantastic and ruthless, personified, I suppose, in front of goals, Sean. They were just phenomenal. They were like a team possessed, really, and their work rate and energy was incredible to watch, really. I suppose listening to Jimmy Kearns after he gave a bit of an interview, he sort of give it away in that, the last couple of seasons, Carduff probably had the better or upper hand of Maracloon, and they felt that this one they weren't going to let this one slip by, and that they certainly done that.
You're involved in coaching, management. You've been around a lot of teams, Kieran. How big of a part can that play within a team mentality? That thought of going out and going, this is going to be our day. We're not going to get caught here again, because you're right. Maracloon were caught twice at intermediate level, both at a league and a championship final, probably on days that the favourites tag would have edged towards them. And as you said, Jamie touched on it there, and even talking to a couple of Maracloon people since that game, they said that themselves. They just come out as a team that today they were not going to be beaten.
Yeah, well, answer the first part of that question, Sean. Like, when you're in a management position, I suppose, and you're up against it, and you know that on any given day, any team can beat anyone. And especially when you take everything into consideration, this was a local derby, and I suppose the history of the previous year in the finals and intermediate as well. It wouldn't have been hard to get them up for. Let's just say that. And if they had, they obviously had a siege mentality where they closed the doors for 2 weeks and really focused in on Carduff. And that would have been very easy from a management perspective to do. It was a 1-game knockout scenario. And I suspect it wouldn't have been very, very difficult to get the lads up for. Look at the proof was in the pudding. They were just phenomenal. Like, if we look at their team, like the youth that they have in their team, Dylan Bourne, cornerback, Alan Kearns as well, it was phenomenal for them. There was one lad in particular that probably wouldn't get much plaudits for me, but the cornerback or centre halfback, he was sort of floating there, was Paul McArdle there. He had a phenomenal job. He picked up, Carduff's top scorer, Fergal Van Roddy, who only registered a single point from play. And another wonderful player for me from the Maracloon club is Packy Dugan-Burke. Packy Dugan-Burke for me is a massive, massive future. He's not big. He's not a big man. He's small in stature. But by God, has he got whatever that it is, he has it in spades. He has tenacity, his work rate, he has honesty, he has skill, he has endeavour, he has everything you want from a player. I think that man has a big, big future, and hopefully in the Monaghan colours too.
Yeah, he has honesty. That's the one thing I've always noted about him when watching him. He's just a real workhorse of a player. He's given a job and he does that job, whatever it might be or whatever is needed of him. He's fit to give it. On the flip side of that, Kieran, and I know Carduff wouldn't have said this or wouldn't like to think it, but could have been an element of complacency maybe in their performance as well. Let's remember that they rounded out their group stages with a With a very good win, it must be said, over the defending champion Scotchtown up on their own home ground. And when I talked to Fergal last week, the one thing I always said was momentum was going to be a big thing going into this weekend. And perhaps maybe they lost a little bit of momentum from that win, but also maybe the wind was a sword in their sails as well. Like we got one over the county champions, so we're in a good place here.
I genuinely don't think there was complacency. I don't think Shim's back in any of his backroom team would have allowed that to creep in. It was just the ferocity that Clune, maybe they were caught on the hop from that perspective. They weren't in a, genuinely, I thought that Carduff would have filtered their 11 men back, set up a defensive zone and protect their goals, but they didn't. They went man to man. And I thought that when the seen that wasn't working, I think it was 1-9 to no score 25 minutes into the game. I thought at that stage, or it's definitely at halftime, they would have, well, they probably was too late at halftime to do it, but certainly midway through the first half, I thought they would have just dropped the men back, set up to that defensive zone and be hard to break down. But they didn't. They went man to man, and the ferocity and the energy and the honesty, I suppose, if you said, of Monaghan, they just couldn't live with it. And that was really the difference between the two teams. The other thing I will say is that their conversion rate in front of goal was poor. They had 5 or 6 wides early on in that first half, and the Monaghan's conversion rate was up in the mid to high 70s, 70%. So there was that was, I suppose, the difference as well. But I don't think they were complacent, Sean. They might have been caught cold, all right.
Yeah, and possibly maybe that was it. I know it was very difficult conditions listening in to Fergal and Stephen Golligley that was there. It wasn't a wind that favoured either side. It was a swirling wind that was being dealt with as well. And as you said, fairness, Monaghan seemed to adapt better to that. And it seemed in the early stages, as you said, possibly Carduff just caught on the hop, because they were caught twice for the infringement of having too many back in their own half as well. That was like you talked about maybe drawing the 11 back. They suddenly realised they were in difficulty and they drew too many back then and coughed up scores on the back of that.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me. They'd been caught twice at that. Been caught once is bad enough, that level, but caught twice. And that's just a lack of, I suppose, communication and organisation, I suppose, in that defensive structure, which was null and void, if I'm being quite honest about it, on the day. The conditions were difficult, but they were difficult for both teams. They weren't really favouring either team. They were sort of coming across pitch towards the stand side. So it was difficult for both sets of teams. I just think that ferocity of energy that Monaghan, I don't think genuinely whoever they were playing, if they'd have brought that ferocity and intensity, would have beaten them on the day. They were just like a team possessed that they were not going to lose by hook or by crook. They just weren't going to lose. And when a team's in that sort of space, Sean, it's very hard to stop them. Very, very hard.
So this weekend, they're going to face Inniskeen then. How difficult is it within 7 days to lift yourself once more to those levels? And I go back to this word momentum. That's the one thing I think Monaghan will have a massive amount of momentum going into this game. Inniskeen are sitting cold now. No matter how many challenge games they've got in the last 4 to 5 weeks, they're cold coming into this.
Yeah, the momentum's a big thing. How big of a 7-day turnaround? Look, at every team will be carrying slight wee knocks. I didn't see anybody coming off injured, so I think they're okay from that perspective. They'll have a new lease of life. Whatever's gone on in the league form or the championship is history. It doesn't matter anymore. You're only as good as your last day, and they've certainly lifted their levels from the championship league form, Sean. And based on the last day in Carduff, like, they're a different animal completely. And again, listening to Kearns afterwards in his interview, he actually came out and said that they had no fear of Inniskeen, and he actually came out and said he thinks they can win this championship. But in any team in that space of mind, you write them off at your peril. But however, they're going in and they're playing an Inniskeen team who is unbeaten throughout that championship league stage already. And the 4 from 4, they're very, very impressive. Andrew Wood, Sean Jones, Colin Megan and Kieran McNulty are all firing up top and direction them to score some. They've good men to come off the bench. Donald Megan, Matty McKenna. They don't seem to have any impact from the loss of Tommy Dern either throughout the year. They seem to dealt with that quite well, and they are a team that are in form. If Monaghan can give the same sort of performances they give against Carduff, they'll definitely put up in a scheme.
Yeah, and in fairness, Inniskeen will know what's coming now. They would have seen last weekend, they would have seen the intensity that they brought to that game. And these sides did meet in the group stages as well. Enniskeane obviously coming out on top on that day. That's what got them straight through to a semi-final, was the 4 wins that they'd accumulated for themselves. So how big a part could that game from that league or the group stage play this weekend as well, the familiarity of the sides?
Genuinely, it'll not matter one iota, Sean, because it's a new competition basically. Once you get the knockout, everything that's gone before you has no bearing on the next game. It really doesn't, because you're in a different stratosphere, I suppose, in terms of levels now. So everybody knows you lose, you're out. So every team is going to bring their best foot forward. Look at, in terms of the last game, 113 to 9 points. Maracloon did find it difficult to score against Enniskeane the last day out. Hard to know. The big open field is at Shannonside Park, who it's going to suit. Enniskeane had the advantage, I suppose, of being there quite regular the last number of years. Maracloon not so much, but they have youth on their side. And again, they definitely have a chance of winning this game. But Maracloon, that is, because in my eyes, Enniskeane are favourites going into this game, regardless of the level of Maracloon's edge at the minute in terms of the Carduff game. If they bring that same edge, they definitely have a chance.
Would that be the one concern then for the Grattans, the long layoff? This was discussed before, I know, even in the championship last year for Clontarf, and no doubt they've worked and they've had challenge games, and they've kept training and they're doing all the work that's required of them, but it's just that coldness of come back in, and there's no safety net now. This is knockout football.
No, you're right. And like, you're dead right. They would have prepared diligently for it, and the challenge match and everything would have been there, but you still don't know where you are until the heat of fire comes on you, and the heat of fire is going to come on them very, very quickly. So you could expect them to start that wee bit slower. Maracloon maybe start that wee bit quicker, but eventually they'll build into the game as the game goes on. When the intensity's there from them, and they're warmed up and ready to go. But I still think they just have that wee bit more than the Maracloon. At the minute, I just don't know if Maracloon can double up on what they produced last week. It's a big ask, but not beyond them.
I was just going to say, is that the winning or the losing of it then? How much last weekend maybe took out of Maracloon, and how much preparation Enniskeane have got for this then?
Yeah, I think that's it, Sean. I think not so much how much last week took out of Hurricane, but can they recreate that is the big question. If they can do that, then definitely they're in with a big shout here. But if they can't, for me, Enniskeane pull away 4 or 5 points easily here, I suppose.
Scottstown and Clontarf, old foes meeting again. They started off the championship. Here they are coming together again. And Scottstown back into a semi-final on the back of what was a very, very impressive performance against Latin. Last weekend, we were ourselves there, keeping an eye on that one. And, this Scottstown team, they were questioned through the championship. They probably would have been questioning themselves even through the championship. But they done what champions do. They got their form, and they got their place, and they pulled it all together when it was required. And I talk about the safety net gone, knockout football. That's when Scottstown step up.
Well, look at, call a spade a spade. Scottstown are the standard bearers of modern football and have been for over a decade. And if anybody's questioning them, they're questioning themselves, Sean, because that's the standards they hold. And they definitely are. We're not firing on all cylinders. Whether that's down to a number of injuries that we're aware of, O'Toole and McCarthy, the obvious ones, but who knows what else is going on in there as well in terms of injuries and preparation. But my God, did they answer the negative tones on the weekend going past, when a number of young lads came in. Young Connolly, a big halfback, and we spoke very, very well about Tommy Mallon in there, and Max McGuire, and Nicky Sherlock. Then the old foe, the two Hughes brothers, and Jack McCarran there as well. But a big player for me as well is their captain, Damien McArdle, who doesn't get the plaudits I think he deserves, because he's such a steady player and a consistent player, and really has shows that leadership qualities on the pitch. I don't think he's that vocal on the pitch, but he definitely shows that leadership quality. And a number of turnovers. I know during commentary, Sean, we spoke quite a bit about the turnovers, but all them players that I mentioned were all involved in them turnovers. And also, I suppose, Michael McCaffrey, he got a thunderous goal and really put it. That was early on. Well, late on in the first half, but it was game set and match at that stage. So it was, from Latin's perspective, they looked, they looked tired, I suppose. They had no aggression about them and they very little intensity. They brought it to Scotchtown in small blurts throughout the first half, maybe a spell of 2 or 3 minutes at each period in the first half, but that was little else they provided throughout the entire game. Scotchtown were ruthless, clinical in front of goals, and they put a big sign up basically saying, "Write us off at your peril."
Yeah, it was literally like a call to come and get us. And I suppose the frightening thing for any other club that's looking in is that they're getting their balance right now between those that are there and have multiple senior championship medals in their pockets to those that are going in search of their first and maybe only their second one this year. And that blend that they have now of the youth that'll come in, do the running, do the hard work, and the experience that's there that's required when it's needed.
It's unbelievable the quality that's coming through that club. For me, Tommy Mallon was man of the match. He's 19, 20 years of age. Young Donegal Connolly there is the same. Max Maguire is not much older. They're very, very young lads. But if you look at, for me, the unselfishness of the senior players, like if you look at Darren Hughes and Kieran Kearns, Darren Hughes was deployed at full forward for most of that league-based championship. He filtered back into the full back line and was consistently turning the ball over, working extremely hard. And to his right, or just directly behind him, was his brother at full back, who has been deployed at full forward midfield for Scotstown down through the years and the last decade, but had no problem doing a job at full back for the team. So they'll do whatever's required of them to win. It's just in their nature. They're leaders and they're winners.
It was an interesting point during the course of that game where Kieran Duffy had got a 2-pointer, Dara Dempsey got a point. It was back to a 1-point game. Scotstown, I remembered seeing at the time, they were sort of pinned back into their own half. Rory maybe having a bit of difficulty getting kickouts out. And then all of a sudden, and you often wonder, does this call come from the sideline or it's the leadership of these guys? Kieran Kearns positioned himself over towards the terrace end, right on the sideline. And I think there was 3 resulting kickouts went there, and he claimed all 3 of them one-on-one battles. And indeed, I think, if not the goal, certainly score 1 point come from claiming those balls. To have that within your game management, to know when you need to do something to change it, to get yourself out of a pressure cooker situation.
Well, I know 100% that comes from the players. Like the players on the field and the man, they probably have calls from the keeper, obviously, sort of set plays from kickouts. But you're right, I can vividly remember the one you're talking about down underneath the terrace then there, where Kieran caught the ball and there was 2 or 3 around him and he had a lot of work to do to win possession, primary possession, and then get out of trouble. Like that's the quality of footballer he is. And I suppose we didn't mention Rory Beggan, who is also a senior player of this team and a leader, by no doubt, and also top scorer. Like he never had I don't think he had a shot at a 2-pointer on the weekend. I don't think, no, he didn't. And that's credit, I suppose, Latin's discipline in terms of giving that option away. But again, I think he scored 10 points against Carduff. He's going to be super important. Scotstown getting over the line. And they will be tested this weekend. There's no doubt about it, by a Clontipper team who seemed rejuvenated, fresh. They're going very, very well. A bit of youth in there now as well. Of course, a familiar name within the Clontipper club, young Charlie Moan, who I'm familiar with. Was on the county minors. He's another young lad that has huge potential. He's going to come into that team at some stage if he doesn't start. Aaron Carey, Dean McDonald, Dara Hughes, Ryan McGuigan, Conor McManus are in all fine form. They're all fighting the points and goals this year. And they seem to be playing with a fluidness that was never there before. Well, was there, I suppose, when Conor would have come back into the fold. But I suppose Conor not being within the Monaghan setup this year is probably giving him that wee bit extra time to focus on his body and get himself right for these. And it's one game that I'm really, really looking forward to, Sean.
Yeah, it's the big one of the weekend. It's throwing in 2:00. It's the first game of that doubleheader. We know these sides have said started the championship and it was a 2-pointer right at the death between, you mentioned Charlie Moan and Uncle Desi, the back and the forth, and Desi then decided that he'd take the pressure off the young shoulders of the nephew, put it over, and a draw game on that occasion. And this has it written all over it that it's going to be another tight affair. and it could come down to just a big score or a mistake being the difference.
Well, 122 to 122 the last day out. It was a phenomenal game. You're right, Desi scored the 2-pointer to equalise it, and they deserved that draw that day. Yeah, like, I mean, what's it going to come down to? Weather conditions, can they restrict Rory for like the same way Latin done from them 2-pointers? Although they didn't need it against Latin, which is a telling thing on its own right from the Scotchtown perspective. So it's hard. It's a hard one to call. It's one that I'm very much looking forward to, Sean. And we didn't mention, I suppose, Killian Lavelle there to come in, or the start obviously Colin Green, and of course Desi Moan to come in there as well. They've serious talent in both teams and experience and youth. So if you were to base it on the performance of the weekend, like Scotchtown were phenomenal. How much of Scotchtown was brilliant and how much of Latin was poor. For me, Scotchtown were fantastic. That layoff for Clontibbert will do them no harm at all. It'll give Conor McManus that extra couple of weeks to get the body right. They'll be very, very much looking forward to this from a Clontibbert perspective, and get your kind toss it, Sean, because I think genuinely this is the hardest one to call in a long and many a year.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting. I know we used that word momentum earlier on in the conversation, and Scotstown will have the momentum coming into this one. But I wouldn't be putting Clontibbert into a cold category, because they nearly, I'm not going to say they would have planned for this, but there would have been the expectation nearly of knowing we're probably going to be meeting Scotstown again, if not in the last four, depending on how the draw went, possibly maybe in a county final. So they've been gearing up for this from the minute they knew they were in a semi-final. They probably knew in their own heads, well, we know who our opposition is probably going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from an analysis point of view and from all that, like, they know each other that well. You know what I mean? There's not really much work to do in that. Your man markups will be the height of it, I suppose, when it comes down to that. But they will, like, that Clontibbert team, there's a lot of experienced players in it. How much more have they got to give? Is this the last throw at the dice for a lot of them players? Potentially it could be, and if that's the case, they're probably they're going to be very, very hard to beat. And I'm nearly afraid to say it, Sean. Like, I'm nearly afraid to tip Clontibbert there. But I was just looking at them, like, they're scoring. Like, they were top scores by a country mile there. They've 110 scores for, and there's nobody in either groups very, very close to that at all. So they're scoring very, very well, and that's including Scotstown's big win against Cromartin, scored 6-14 or something like that. So they're scoring. They're scoring very well. They've only conceded on average there about 12, 14 points, 15 points a game, and in the modern day that's not a lot. So on balance, they've got everything right. Scotchtown, I suppose, they've really raised their game. Their standards are back there. There's talk maybe Conor McCarthy might be back for the semi-final. Who knows? If he does be back, that could be a big lift. I'm nearly afraid to say it, but I think Clontibbert just could get over the line in this one, based on everything that the last couple of weeks and the bit of stats that's available to me. It's going to be a cracker.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's going to come down to that, nearly, as you said, just nearly deeply analysing it, the stats, because tactically the two teams will negate nearly against each other, so they will. And we know the majority of the Clontibbert panel were there last weekend. Obviously, the game was in Clontibbert, so they've gotten a good look now at Scotstown. They know, like, there's nothing new, dare I say, that Scotstown can bring. Just that youth, and maybe that's the one thing that was, but I say, a concern to them, that we can negate and not give away frees that Rory's going to punish us with. We know what Kieran and Darren Hughes bring to the game. We know Damien McCartan is going to be picking up Conor McManus. There's so many of them things. But all of a sudden, if a Tommy Mallon that has just exploded onto the scene, there's a Max Maguire, a Matthew Maguire, lads that they maybe wouldn't be over familiar with.
No, 100%. And that is a brilliant point, Sean. Because it sort of caught us all in the hop with the amount of changes that there was last week. Tommy Mallon was exceptional. Like, he was exceptionally good for a young man. He was like I said it during commentary, like a conductor of an orchestra. He set up so much. He gave Micheál McCaffrey that ball like a needle through like a thread through a needle of the defence. That thing was a superb pass, opened up the whole defence. So he's got that in his locker. They're definitely going to have to push up on him. They can't be giving him a free roll like Latin did. Donegal Connolly at wing half back, another 19, 20-year-old young man, just came on to the senior squad this year too. He's an attacking wing half back and tenacious as well. He has everything in his locker. And then you talk about the two Maguires as well, and Nicky Sheriff for me, who's deadly accurate in front of goals. Them's all new names, I suppose, that not the people around the county scene would be familiar with, and probably people around their own age level would be familiar with, but not too many others would be familiar with them. But everybody, I know them after Sunday, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a fascinating battle, a fascinating double header to be looking forward to. We will have live coverage of both games here with us on Northern Sound. Just briefly, the relegation group then as well, it returns this weekend. And after that opening round, I know there was wins for Cromartin and True. So Ballybay and Armullen this weekend's a massive one for them. They need to be getting results. And I know it's Ballybay taking on Cromartin and it's Armullen taking on True. Interesting, that Ballybay Cromartin game is the same that was in the league relegation playoff as well, that Cromartin won. So from Ballybay's perspective, another loss this weekend, and dare we say it, that they're intermediate for next year.
Yeah, it's not looking great for Ballybay, to be fair. They've had a torrid time, but they really threw the kitchen sink at the True game last week. You know, they lost that one by a point, and I think that might have been the one that they were putting all their eggs in the one basket to try and get through that one. And fairness to True, they hung on and got over the line, but I don't think it's looking great for Ballybay. And obviously they've a number of injury concerns, and they've had a number of injury concerns down through the years. But the one I remember commentating on them last year with yourself, Sean, in Donegal Tipperary against Latin, and the amount of injuries they had that day. And I was sort of thinking, yes, if Ballybay can hang on here for a 4 or 5 point loss, it wouldn't be too bad. You just couldn't write them off. They've that dogged spirit and, you know, a fighting spirit, and I suppose, but their catalyst and their leader of that, Drew Wiley's not available as well. So there's a number of injury concerns, and from Ballybay's perspective, and I just don't think it's gonna end well for them, unfortunately, Sean.
No, it's unfortunate, right? Senior champions only back a number of years ago, and just to find themselves where they are. And I'm just thinking back, even that senior championship, that was the doggedness of Ballybay. Nobody ever expected them to be winning in that year, and they went and they done it, turned over Scotstown team. I think they were going for 5 in a row at that time.
Yeah, that's right.
So they were. So they have that in them, but as you said, maybe just the leadership of the Drew Wileys of this world missing. Paul Finley, man, I know Paul did make a return for
Yeah,
them against True, and
yeah.
and that's probably Paul just with a massive heart coming out to try and do something once more for the club. The other fixture, Mullen against True, and True probably would have thought them found themselves unfortunate to be in the relegation group.
Yeah, True. Yeah, I know one of the selectors, stroke managers, and talked about True a number of times this year, and yeah, they would be surprised at themselves for getting in there. I know they had Clare midfielder, just his name evades me now, to come into the club this year. He played midfield
They
for
did,
Clare,
right?
and he moved into, yeah, I can't think of his name, but he has been a brilliant addition to the team. But I think they'll have enough to stay in senior ranks, Sean. They're obviously a senior club, and no, but it wasn't that long ago that they won the All Ireland. In fact, it was 2013 because I played against them that year, and you know, so they have that tendency to float between intermediate and senior, and not so much Ballybay. It's a while since Ballybay been intermediate, so it has.
That is indeed. And then Mullen on the other side as well, again, needing the result, obviously, to keep themselves up. And a team that have flirted with the bottom end of one table and the top end then of the intermediate table as well. So it'll be interesting. And depending on those results this weekend, that could be that done and dusted, or we may get a third weekend out of it, as I said, depending on the results. And then finally, in a skiing park, Grattan, Saturday is the double header for the intermediate semi-finals, and Dunamine taking on Killarney and Castleblaney taking on Carrickmacross. And if ever we needed an example of, if you're in senior and you dropped intermediate, that the difficulty of getting back up, I would argue Castleblaney probably a prime example of that. Dropped out of senior, had never been an intermediate club because never was an intermediate grade beyond. They went junior to senior, so they'd never been in this grade. And they're there now this couple of years, still looking to get their way out of it. And face a tough task, I would argue, against Carrickmacross this weekend in the local derby.
Yeah, they're facing the favourite, Sean. That's what they're facing, and it's an uphill battle for them. And again, you're right. They found themselves in intermediate, and it's very, very hard to get out of intermediate. And that intermediate, I remember looking at the start year of the intermediate group. It was the most, it was the hardest intermediate group that I have seen in Monaghan in a number of years in terms of the quality of teams that were in there. So it's going to be very difficult for Blaney to top at Carton Cross. Carton Cross are absolutely flying and are everybody's favourite. And to be fair to them, they were lucky not to get up last year as well. But they'll definitely have that wee bit of impetus in them this year to push on now and get back up to senior ranks. I fancy them to get over to Castleblaney this weekend.
And Dunamine, Killarney then as well. Dunamine, in fairness, coming through the group as well, obviously, topping it, getting to the semi-final and coming up against the side, Killarney, that done the jump from junior intermediate to senior to intermediate, and here they are looking to get back up again.
So Killarney for me, they are an underdog worth watching. They have plenty of talent in their team. You know, they disposed of Clonus, not that. I seen that game a number of weeks ago. They're impressive and they're workmanlike. They have shooters in front of goal that can score. They'll not be easily bet. On the other side, then you're right, Dunamine. Hadn't a great league, inconsistent, I suppose, but found the mojo, as you like, the county man come back into the scene there. So yeah, I think genuinely that's a tougher one to call for me. But I suppose everybody would be thinking that Dunamine should have enough to get over that one, but not as easy as the Carrick for me, the Carrick across Benny game to call.
It's very interesting. It's the four south or southern based clubs that are contesting an intermediate, which is very interesting. And obviously, it's if Ballybay drop out, you'd be looking to think Carrickmacross, Castleblaney to get a town, because I think if Ballybay drop out, there's no town teams left in senior football when you look at it as well. So it's amazing, I suppose, the torn there has been in football and club football in the county over the past number of years.
Yeah, but I suppose if you look at Sean generationally, it happens. You know, teams like unless you're the big clubs there, the likes of Scotchtown, and a lot of teams do fluctuate between senior, intermediate, and junior. You have a lot of that. I know the county board took an initiative this year to try and stabilise that from happening. We're talking about going 12 teams in its senior and 8 and 6. It just didn't get past. I think with a wee bit more thought is to stop that yo-yoing, Sean, and you know, have more players playing at a higher level like senior football. Obviously, it'll filter through to the county team eventually. Not happen overnight, but over a number of years, you'd think that would be a successful model. But I think a wee bit more thought into that, and it could stop that yo-yoing, and a wee bit more stabilisation and players playing at a higher level, and thus your county manager picking a player that's consistently playing at a higher level.
It's interesting, just you talked about that and that maybe the changing of the structures. It would have been the junior clubs probably that rebelled the most against it. And I know obviously you're involved with the junior club yourself, and the club that I'd be with myself as well from a committee perspective, Rockhurry Junior also. And the big concern was that you'd be cut adrift down at the bottom end in junior. That was the key thing, that it's a step to go junior to intermediate. It's a step to, not as big a step, I would argue, to go intermediate to seniors. Probably a bigger step to go junior to intermediate.
Yeah. No, you're right. It was the junior clubs, I suppose, it didn't rebel about, I suppose, what was put on the table in terms of the proposition wasn't good enough. I suppose there is a better model out there, and it was give, I suppose, and was talked about. And if they do take around that model and give a wee bit more of a carrot to the junior clubs, potentially something like this could be easy enough passed. But obviously, it would need a consensus of everybody, especially the junior clubs, to make it happen. But you're right. The standard between, I would say, the top 4 in intermediate and say the bottom 6 in senior, there wouldn't be that big of a gap at all, Sean. The gap, I suppose, from the top 4 to the top 2 in junior would be significant. Like you know, it would be significant. But look, there was something that they might bring it back up next year. Like, and one of the ideas floated was that, you know, if the junior clubs were down to 6 teams, say, or 8 teams with the potential of 2s, like Scotchtown, and I think it maybe Carrickmacross Town were putting in a B team, or Blaney putting in a B team, or somebody else putting in a B team to the junior championship and league, that they could run the junior championship off and then maybe amalgamate 4 or 5 of the junior clubs and let them play in the senior championship as well. That was floated as an idea, and that's the carrot, I suppose, that needs to be given to the junior clubs to help facilitate something like that getting over the line, Sean.
Yeah, and obviously, I know looking forward, as you said, it's getting players to be playing at a higher level, a higher quality that then feed into your county structure then as well from the club perspective.
No, that's what it's all about ultimately. Like, I suppose the club man is always about the club and he wants to win. At the higher echelons of football, is the county scene that really is the main factor in every county, or it should be. And no different from Gabriel Bannigan's point of view, he'd want all his players, or a vast majority of them, playing at senior level, because obviously that's where the best football's played, Sean.
Absolutely. Just briefly, Kieran, finally on the championship so far, and from what we've seen, it has to be said it has been a very open championship right across all 3 grades. I know Emmy Vale probably are the one team that are dare I say it, storming ahead in the junior championship. That was to be expected. But above that, it's an open championship. Even this weekend, the defending champions going in, Scotstown, strong favourites, but there's no guarantees.
No, that's fair. That's definitely fair. Like probably Carrick might be favourites, but there's definitely 2 or 3 teams in there that will have a word to say about that. And look at Scotstown. What have they won, Sean? 10 of the last 11 championships or something like that. They've lost 5 or 6 games in a decade. So they don't lose. But just there's something in the back of my head saying that this could be the one. It could be the one. I know I'll be walking out of St. Tiernos Park and I'll be getting the Kearns, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? But there's just something at the back of my throat there, just not sitting easy with me. And I just think, looking at it this morning, and looking how fresh Kiltibber look as well, it's definitely going to go down to the wire.
Well, it certainly is. And I said, we'll be there for it all. It's another Monaghan Way completed for you. Don't forget, as always, you can check in on them on any of the platforms that you pick up on your podcast. And indeed, you may have checked out episode 22, the one previous to this, where we had a beautiful conversation, sat down and chatted to Carl O'Connell, of course, who hung up the boots from an inter-county perspective, but still playing his trade for his club. And it's still remarkable that he only took up and started playing Gaelic football at 17 years of age, has Ulster titles, an All-Star, and represented his country. It's definitely one worth the catching. And of course, we'll be catching the action this weekend